Hey everyone, welcome to episode 445 of the All Dolphins podcast on this January 6th, 2025, the day after the Miami Dolphins concluded their 2024 regular season. And my guest here, I'll introduce him right away because he's shaking his head, so he needs to be acknowledged. Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Yes, the Dolphins concluded their season with a 32-28 loss against the New York Jets. It's a Miami Gammy, by the way. That's my new term instead of a Scory Gammy. So we're talking Dolphins. I call it Miami Gammy. First 32-20 final in Dolphins history. Left them at 8-9, so there goes the streak of winning seasons. Big whoop, they weren't making the playoffs anyway. Thanks to the Denver Broncos spanking the living daylights out of the Kansas City Chiefs, who were interested in one thing and one thing only, and that was basically to leave the game without injuries and also to give their practice squad quarterback, whose name escapes me right now, Chris O, some reps in the second half. And then came the news, and then came the rainstorm of Dolphin news, including fine work by you and the other reporters who were at MetLife Stadium, getting Tyreek to open up. And then the Stephen Ross statement saying, everything's fine here. We're going to run it back with Mike McDaniel, Chris Greer. Perk, where do we start with all of this?
Oh, man. Well, here's where I'm going to start with all of this. The season was a disaster, a failure. And Tyreek. Oh my goodness, Tyreek. So, the Tyreek pulling himself out of the game apparently in the fourth quarter takes me back to Tua's words on Friday and some other players during the week of we're going to see who's out here, who's with us, who wants to be with us. Tyreek kind of showed me that he doesn't want to be with you. However, Tyreek speaks a lot of crap. He talks a lot of yeah. I know, right now. I know this is a shock. This is shocking, and so I do think that Tyreek was speaking out of frustration. I do think that he was speaking in the moment. I do not think that he wants to be traded. He's talked a lot about he wants to be here forever. And that's easy to say when you're feeling the love and you're getting 1,000-yard seasons and you're getting 170 targets from Tua primarily. But now that things have fallen apart, he's a little upset. But look, I think that Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel have to kind of marshal their forces, bring Tyreek back in the fold, because if you trade him, you're getting pennies on the dollar. And your whole offense is gone. Look, by the way, Mike McDaniel has to design a whole new offense next year anyway, right? You can't come back with the deep throws to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. That's been figured out. You can't run this dink and dunk offense. That's no good. So you've got to come up with a brand new offense. How you sell that to Tyreek and how you make Tyreek a featured part of it, I don't know. But to me, from where we stand right now, the Dolphins would be better off keeping Tyreek, and you'll have Chubb, and you'll have Phillips, and you'll have Waddle. I'm going over the talent. Chop Robinson, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith, Tua, Aaron Brewer, Austin Jackson, Jordan Brooks, Jalen Ramsey, Cater Kohu. You're going to have a squad. You're going to have about an 8 or 9 win squad before free agency and before the draft. And before, hopefully, you can coach them up for another win. I think if you get Tyreek back in the fold, you're looking at another 10 or 11 win team. That's what I'm thinking.
After they went 8-9 against the easiest schedule in the NFL. Okay, here's my take on this, and I wrote about this. Free plug on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, and I wrote this last night. Where absolutely I'm with you there. This is Tyreek speaking out of frustration, and because, oh no, poor dude, for the first time in 10 years, he's not going to the playoffs.
Right.
Like, like he made that point, like first time not going to the playoffs. Like seriously. Right. Also, this is the first time in his NFL career he's not going to the Pro Bowl.
Yep.
Unless he's an alternate that we don't know about, because the Dolphins do not release the alternates, unlike some other teams around the league. But I severely doubt he's an alternate because he didn't have that good of a season, even though he does have the name. And then he dealt with a whole lot of different physical ailments throughout the season, not to mention all the drama off the field, including certainly highlighted or lowlighted by his detention outside of Hard Rock Stadium in the opener. So last night as I'm writing this, I'm thinking, Okay, he's just, let's just say he's a very emotional guy who put politely, may not be the most mature player in the NFL. So he's just letting off steam, and he had cameras in his face, so it's a good time to vent. And then today he puts as a profile picture a shot of Antonio Brown when he basically quit on the Buccaneers in the middle of a game, took off his jersey. Remember, he was bare-chested walking off the field. I think it was at MetLife Stadium, and then superimposed his face on that picture, basically suggesting sayonara, adios. And it's like, wow, he had time to think about it, cool down a little bit, and that's what you come up with. Like, wow.
That's the troll job. That's the troll in Tyreek. It's like after the Houston game.
If he was doing it to be like, let me poke around and troll the fans about all that, I would say grow the hell up. And I know you've written a couple of columns at sunsentinel.com basically suggesting somebody needs to have a talk with him. Either it's never happened, or B, it went in one ear, out the other, because obviously if that was trolling, he didn't learn his lesson. Man, could that really, if that's trolling, then dude, wow, that's in bad taste.
I mean, look what he did after the Houston loss. Time for me to go, coach. Or time for me to go, coach.
There was no comma. Yeah, but yeah. Now in retrospect, maybe there was something to it. If, as who was it? Adam Schefter on Pat McAfee show today suggested that it's been brewing. But what exactly would be the issue? The only issue it could be, it's not contractual because the Dolphins took care of him before the season when they didn't need to.
Right.
They had him under contract for the next 3 years, even though his guaranteed money was expiring after 2024. So it's not that. Then it could be like his role in the offense, or the fact that it's not as Tyreek centric as he'd like it to be.
I think it's just general frustration that things aren't going the way that he wants them to go. You don't have Tua throwing him passes. The offense isn't humming. He's not as popular on social media. They're not doing the touchdown sellies. He's not being celebrated. It's not about Tyreek right now. And Tyreek wants it to be about Tyreek. And so I think that that's what you're seeing here is just a sniveling, spoiled child throwing a temper tantrum. And you've got to get him back into the fold.
Can I jump in a quick second?
Yes.
Unlike Mike McDaniel with the Calais Campbell thing, it's not an adult temper tantrum.
It's not. No. Yeah, you're right. It is not. This is a 3-year-old temper tantrum. And, the big thing to me here is it points out once again that the Dolphins need culture change. Somebody's got to pull Tyreek aside and say, Reek, this is BS. You can't be doing this all the freaking time, Reek. You had Calais Campbell in handcuffs because of your foolishness. And I think the only 2 players on the roster, 3 players who probably could have said something to Tyreek are Teron Armstead, Calais Campbell, and Jalen Ramsey. And Teron and Calais are going to be gone next year. So probably. So where is the leadership? Who fills that leadership vacuum? Let's hope that Tyreek and Jalen Ramsey don't get more power. Let's hope that guys who come in, such as Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, can do something, but they don't have the unfilled pelts on the wall, right? They're not going to the Hall of Fame. They don't have the personality. They're both kind of chill guys. I'm not saying that they're weak in any fashion, but they're both kind of chill, laid-back guys. Somebody who's got some real power has to go to Tyreek and say, look, dude, this isn't going to fly. Zach Sealer can't do it. Jordan Brooks can't do it. A coalition can't do it. I don't know, quite honestly, aside from Jalen Ramsey, who's kind of on the same mindset as Tyreek. Tua, I don't know. I don't know. Right, that's not Tua's style. It's Teron and Calais, and they're both leaving. And so then after that, it falls to Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel. And you have to think if this conversation hasn't happened or sunk in after 3 years, I don't know if they can draw a line in the sand. Tyreek might just laugh at him. Maybe he's done that before. I don't know. But this team needs culture change. You cannot have this type of behavior from one of your elected team captains, one of the people that the players look up to. You cannot have this type of knucklehead behavior.
And there goes the Dolphins' low knucklehead factor. As
I always point out, I know he has taken it up like 6 or 7 levels in 24 hours.
Yeah, and the problem, he's one of those guys where I would say, like Stephon Diggs, if the Dolphins move from him, it may become a case of addition by subtraction.
Could be.
On the field, yeah, I think we saw in 2024 that the Dolphins are not as good as they can be offensively if Tyreek's not racking up 1,700 yards.
Right.
And being the explosive, ridiculous playmaker that he was in his first 2 years. He wasn't that this year. I said all season long, he did not look like the same guy to me, like physically. He went from like being stupid fast to just being fast. And without that extra gear, he's not special anymore as a wide receiver. He's good, but he's not special anymore. And that's an awful lot of baggage to carry for a guy if he's going to be just good, not special. Soaks up an awful lot of oxygen. If you want to talk about teams focused on a goal, with him, it's all kind of always focused on what's going on with him, what's going to happen next. You mentioned one of the issues, though. You're going to get pennies on the dollar if you trade him. I saw somebody like looking for, if you can get the first round pick, trade him. You're not getting a first round pick. Spoiler alert.
Nope.
Well, unless you throw in Tyreek in a 2, maybe you get a late 1. But outside of that, you're not getting a 1 strictly for Tyreek. Not happening. So, yeah, now the Dolphins are in a pickle. And the other part of it is, do you want a guy who's going to be a problem? Keep him around if he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be there.
Correct. Yeah, that's that. And that's the big thing to me, Poop, is that Tyreek, he will cause problems all throughout that team and all in that locker room because apparently he doesn't give a damn. And we've seen this after 3 years. And look, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because I respect Tyreek's talent. I don't respect the way he conducts himself. This team needs more leadership. Like, whether Tyreek wants to play that role or not, that's the role that he's been given with his talent and with his money. So you've got to live up to it. Like, they can't deal with this dysfunction. Like, it holds the team back. That's what it does. It doesn't allow you to reach your full potential because you've got this knucklehead that you've got to placate and you've got to force the ball to him, even though it might not be the best thing for the team. It might not be the best thing for the offense. Look, Tyreek remains the best player on that roster. With all due respect to Jalen Ramsey and Calais is still on the roster and Zach Sealer and Tua. Tyreek is the best player on that roster, but he's got to get his behavior up to a level to where it is Pro Bowl level, Hall of Fame level, example setting level. Like, he just really doesn't accept the role that he has on this team. Like, guys are going to follow him. And, look, we hear reports about people being late to meetings. I'm not saying that it's Tyreek. I don't know who it is, but by being 5 minutes early to a meeting, you set an example, right? I don't think Calais and Teron are walking in 2 minutes before the meeting starts or right on time. They're probably in place, notebooks out, have probably been watching some extra film by the time the other guys get in there. Like, that's the kind of stuff they need from Tyreek. He's got to go above and beyond because his team needs him that much.
I agree. And I want to go back to something I said that I mentioned. He didn't look the same to me this year. And the question now, was it strictly because of all the things he dealt with physically? Is Father Time again winning another game? Because Father Time has a pretty damn good record. And he's going to be 31 years old in March. And wide receivers tend to not be as fast as they get older. I kind of think maybe it's related to all the injuries he did because a lot of those dealt with his legs or his lower body. And he mentioned the knee procedure in the offseason. He had a foot issue. I think there was an ankle issue that Wes Welker might have thrown in there. So that's the concern. And you mentioned the accountability part of it and being on time. And that brings me to something Zach Sealer said today. Was a locker clean-out day at Dolphin camp, and Zach Sealer had some pretty eye-opening comments here. Another team captain who watched a fellow team captain basically bail on his team last night. the part I'm trying to decide right now whether let me get to C11. I'm trying to decide right now how much of an issue I have with Tyreek pulling himself out of the game. Again,
Oh,
if he's playing hurt and he's looking at the scoreboard and it's 38-0 Denver or 31-0 Denver, I'm having a hard time getting all worked up about him pulling himself out of the game. Again, depending on the level of pain through which he was playing. Zach Sealer, however, said this. The question was asked, like, there need to be a higher standard, among other things, for guys being on time. He said, absolutely, what Mike McDaniel does a great job of is preaching a player locker room that needs to come from us as players, leaders and captains, as well as the staff, and get everyone here and get everyone working together from day one in OTAs and camp and get things taken care of from day one and take care of business to start fast this year. Asked, was that a problem this year? There were things going on this year in the background that needed to get taken care of. Some things could have been, I would say, we needed to be on our P's and Q's earlier in the season, earlier in camp. It's a point of focus this year. We're going to make sure we don't mess that up again. So if we're talking about a team that doesn't have the right culture, does that play a part into this label of being soft? Is that part of being soft, not being accountable, doing the things you need to take care of, being real pros?
I don't know if it's being soft. To me, it just reeks of a culture problem. And if you want to say that that's soft, I don't know. It's McDaniel being soft on violations. It's McDaniel being soft on the details. So if that's the kind of soft you mean, yes, definitely 100%. I have a major problem with Tyreek taking himself out of the game. And first of all, he gave conflicting stories.
Yeah.
He said it's the wrist, and then he said he looked up at the scoreboard, and then he said that Mike McDaniel, or he said a coach pulled him out. And so it's like, which is it, Tyreek? And really, I'll say this also about Tyreek, that his, everything that he does and says just leaves kind of it leaves a trail of doubt. So here's where I'm going with this. A couple of weeks ago, I was asking the coaches, Tyreek's left wrist injury, is this a troll job?
Yes.
And, I think they were looking at me like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? Because of this, because of what he does with his avatar, putting his head on AB, on Antonio Brown, and the Houston thing, time for me to go, coach. And I don't know what's real with Tyreek. That's kind of the thing. And he plays around too much. This isn't a time to play. After the Houston loss, wasn't a time to play. Like, aren't you ever serious? And that's kind of the thing. So when we talk about this left wrist injury, this comes up, right? The left wrist injury, and now all of a sudden he's doing more. He's returning punts all of a sudden. Like, which is it? Like, if your wrist is and possibly has a torn ligament and requires surgery maybe after the season, you're doing more and you want to take more reps in practice. Like, which is it, Tyreek? That's the thing with Tyreek. Again, I'm trying to speak respectfully about Tyreek because I respect his talents, but like, it's the boy who cried wolf. I mean, I don't know what to believe with him anymore. And so, when he says he wants a trade, when he says he has a left wrist injury, when Wes Welker says he's got an ankle injury, I just don't know what to believe with Tyreek.
No, that's a good point. And truth be told, it's getting old a little bit.
Yeah.
No, for those of us who are in the business of requiring page views to thrive with our business, he's great to have around because he's certainly a content generator. As a football observer looking at this team, it does get old. And I'm going to guess it's interesting because already some articles have come up with possible destinations for Tyreek if he indeed is traded. One of them is Kansas City. My immediate reaction is like, why in the hell would the Chiefs want him back?
No. Yeah, Kansas City is a team that, they just went through a little knuckleheadedness with Rashee Rice, and didn't somebody else get in trouble there? Maybe I thought somebody it was fairly minor, I thought. But anyway, they're a fairly low knucklehead factor team. They just got rid of Tyreek's contract. Like they won back-to-back Super Bowls without him, and then went 15-1 or a 16-1. Like why do you want that? Or I guess 15-2, right? But
Yeah.
but why would you want to invite that back? Like you've done better without him. You don't want that back.
No, correct. And then Tuesday we're having our annual end of season press conference with Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer. I am going to guess there might be one or two questions about Tyreek Hill. Maybe we'll get some clarity from them as to where their heads are in regards to Tyreek and having him back. But it's just not the way you want to end a regular season, which sucked, as you mentioned, to begin with. Let's move on.
Let me say something else about this.
Sure, go ahead.
Tyreek didn't speak today. And so what you have is Tyreek sets this dumpster fire and everybody else has to extinguish it. Zach Sealer's answering questions about it, and Teron Armstead, and tomorrow Greer and McDaniel. That's probably going to dominate the press conference. And at a certain point, I'm sure there's people in that building going, why does everybody have to answer for Tyreek? Like he didn't even show up. And we're all answering. Alec Ingold, like some of the nicest dudes to ever walk the Dolphins locker room. Liam Eichenberg, Emmanuel Ogba, they're answering all these questions about Tyreek who didn't even show up. Like, I'm sure it's got to be frustrating for them. I'm sure that on their private little group chats and group texts, Tyreek's name has come up in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, and if I'm playing amateur detective here, I think if there was absolutely nothing to his comments, he would have appeared in the locker room today and been like, got you guys going again. Yeah. Something to that effect. I think the fact that he wasn't there, I think kind of says something. I think he may want to go somewhere where, remember how he's talking about the pursuit of 2000 last year, and he even mentioned it at some, I think he may have mentioned it. He mentioned it at some point in this offseason. Then he said, no, it's not about that.
Right.
I think he's the kind of guy who really wants to be like heavy focal point of the offense. And he wasn't that. Yeah, we could go on with Tyreek for quite a while. But you mentioned Ingold, who spoke. Bradley Chubb spoke. Liam Eichenberg was there. Emmanuel Ogba. And basically everybody who was asked that I heard had the same answer. Was basically, the dude's a grown man. He can say what he wants to say. The only one who said anything mildly more forceful than that was Bradley Chubb, who basically said, look, if somebody doesn't want to be here, we'll just go with the guys who want to be here, which was kind of the right attitude to go. Okay, moving on to major topic number 2.
Yes.
I think you and I both called it, didn't we, Park?
We did.
There wasn't going to be any change.
Nope.
And I chronicled this. I wrote a column this morning on the website, MiamiDolphinsInside.com. Why is anybody surprised about this? And I never wrote a column expressing a position of like, this is what they should do, because to me, there wasn't what they should do. What they should have done is not hand out extensions all over the place last summer when they hadn't won anything. Then there was no reason to. That's the part. Why? Now, once that's done, where you're going to blow everything up after 1 year because it went sideways?
Yeah, and well, here's the why, because Mike McDaniel, according to Tua, basically pounded the table and said Tua needs this extension. And that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was after Jalen Waddle, and then Tua came, and then McDaniel, and then Tyreek, and then Jalen Ramsey, or something like that. Yeah. So Tua is the reason that you're in this position, that extension, and Mike McDaniel banging the table is the reason he got that extension. And Chris Greer not having the cojones, I guess, to stand up to no.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, finish your point, but I'm already talking. I'm going to give him. Sorry,
Chris Greer needed to stand up and say, no, we're not giving this extension. But that's not Chris Grier. That's not how he operates. That's not how the tandem of Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel operates. And that's why we're in this situation, is because nobody would stand up and say this is wrong. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say nobody had enough of a convincing argument to tell Steve Ross, don't write the check. This is wrong. Somebody might have stood up and said this is wrong, but clearly their voice did not resonate with Steve Ross. But that's why you're in this situation, because I had written I wouldn't have extended Tua. He would have played this year on his fifth-year option. Think of the bargaining power the Dolphins would have if they went to Tua to the table right now. After Tua's had a concussion and a hip injury, the money that you save, you could revamp the team. You could say, Tyreek, get the hell out of here. We're going to take this money, and whatever the hell we get for you, we're going to build a new team, but now you're stuck. And it's the culture change. You needed somebody to stand up and say this is wrong, make Tua play out the fifth year on the fifth-year option, and then if he deserves it, you give him the money. But we're in this situation, to me, largely because you gave that extension because nobody would stand up to McDaniel or Grier or tell Steve Ross this is absolutely the wrong move. Or nobody's voice was strong enough, I should say.
Or maybe they all agreed. The problem is, again,
that's the scary thing.
Is we don't have a clear picture of the power structure.
Right.
Yes,
right.
Chris Grier's general manager. He was also a general manager in 2016 when the Dolphins had a senior VP of football operations and Mike Tannenbaum, whose voice probably superseded that of Grier. And then Adam Gase, after he becomes head coach of the Jets, in his introductory press conference, when he's asked, "Do you have personnel power with the Jets here?" He goes, "No, but I had him in Miami and I didn't even ask for him." Yeah. Okay, and so now in 2019, Chris Grier becomes more of a powerful GM, if that's the term we want to use. And now, as it stands right now, if you don't think like Mike McDaniel has some say in the decisions that are made beyond just Chris Grier being a nice guy and saying, "Okay, Mike, that's what you want," I think with Steve Ross, and I very possibly that part of that extension that Mike McDaniel signed included some more personnel say. And it's not just a Tua thing, it's a Calais Campbell situation where Mike McDaniel, this is where we refer to the adult temper tantrum, where McDaniel stepped in and said, "No, you're not trading him."
Yeah.
So, you or me?
Go ahead. Right. Go ahead.
No, and this is where, if you, in the statement released by Stephen Ross, what does he say? "I like the fact these guys have a good, positive working relationship." That means they play nice together, but it certainly does not suggest that there is a clear separation of power, that Chris Grier is a decision maker, and he buys the groceries for Mike McDaniel to cook.
Yep. No, 100%. You know what? I said on the text chain, and it might have been ours, that I think that Grier 100% should be fired, and I think McDaniel 101% should be fired. But it's not going to happen. And understand, I don't say that because I think that they're bad football people or that they're incompetent. I say that because they've repeated their mistakes. They haven't learned from what got them what couldn't get them a playoff win in 2022. They didn't learn from that and apply it to 2023, and they didn't learn from that and apply it to 2024. So now here we are, basically in the same spot that we were in 2022, meaning you're still looking for an answer. You've got some talent on this team, but you're still looking for an answer. And again, I'll repeat, you've got to find a brand new offense. Like you can't come back with the deep to Waddle and deep to Tyreek, and you can't come back with the dink and dunk. You've got to design a brand new offense.
Yeah, I will agree with you on the point that it basically, to me, it was always all along, it's McDaniel and Grier go, or they both stay. Right. Because again, they're a great working relationship. They're a kind of a tandem. And once Stephen Ross handed out all that money with all those extensions, basically at the behest of McDaniel / Grier, to Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Ramsey is a different case because he plays defense, but those three guys who are going to be basically the foundation of the offense, then they're all in.
Yep.
And to your point about revamping the offense. I mean, kind of good luck doing that when, again, everything has been based on timing and speed with those two wide receivers. Now, if they trade Tyreek, depending on what else they can get, they're going to do a whole philosophical change, get away from this finesse, motion, deception type of thing.
Yep.
This is where, had they blown up the whole thing, traded Tyreek, then maybe you hire Mike Vrabel and you become like an in-your-face physical team. I don't think that's happening with Mike McDaniel, and if Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle come back.
Unfortunately, I think you're correct. And so, short of that, boy, I think you've got to get, and don't get caught up on the name, but like a Gus Edwards, you need a physical presence, because what I always say, look, and yesterday the running a game was a perfect example. You rush for 135 yards, right? And Achane has 121. He's got a 61-yard run and a 20-yard run. And there's your rushing success right there. 81 of your 135 yards come on 2 runs. But again, you struggle with situational running. So 3rd down, goal line, short yardage, red zone. By the way, this freaking offense, Poop, you get the ball twice in the red zone and you kick 2 field goals in the first half. Like, you can't get a touchdown? Like, really? You can't get a touchdown? Like, wow. You need a physical presence. You need something else. You need to be able to run the ball effectively in those situations. Like, please get some power. Get a Chris Brooks. I know you're not getting Saquon. I know you're not getting Derrick Henry. But just a physical I know you're not getting Josh Jacobs, okay? But just some Chris Brooks, Gus Edwards, just somebody who can run it physically in certain situations. I'm not saying get a 20 carry a game guy, just somebody who can pound the rock in certain situations.
They had Chris Brooks. They let him go.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's right. And he burned him in Green Bay. It's all coming back to me.
He did. Here's a stat for you. The Dolphins had 23 rushing attempts against the Jets. 7 of them were for losses.
Yep. I know. And look at Jalen Wright's, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, 4 carries for -6 with an 8-yard gain.
The other way around.
Okay,
6
yeah.
carries -4 yards.
Yeah, that means
outside of that run, it's 5 carries for -12.
How do you do that? How do you do that, Poop? Like,
hold on. This is how you do that. It's bad blocking, but I got into it with some folks on Twitter this afternoon. It's not strictly the offensive line. Look at those plays. A lot of those are tight ends missing blocks, getting defeated on blocks, or like on the 9-yard loss by Jalen Wright, they had Achane in motion. Was that the one play? And then Julian Hill was leading the way, but Julian Hill left the first guy to go get the second level guy. And the first guy was Will McDonald, shot right through the gap in the 7-yard loss. Please tell me how that's on the offensive line, folks.
Right, that's schematic. Right, that I agree 100. There were at least 2 plays like that where it's one guy and 2 guys. He's got to block 2 guys, and it's like, dude, that's not on Julian Hill. That's your scheme. Like, you were out coached, you were out schemed on this particular play. I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and that's happened quite a bit in 2024. And this is why fans were like, it's so easy to go, offensive line sucks. You fix that, the Dolphins win the Super Bowl. To which I say, simmer down now.
Hey, and let me say this also, that I keep saying this, but your offensive line problem is the 2 guards, right? You had a good center. You had a good in Aaron Brewer. You had a good left tackle in Teron Armstead. You had a good right tackle in Austin Jackson. You had a good backup right tackle in Kendall Lamb. You had a promising young left tackle in Patrick Paul. That's right. Come on. That's reasonable. That's reason. Now your 2 guards, okay, maybe they aren't NFL starters on 20 of the 32 teams, or however you want to phrase it, maybe 30. I don't know. But dude, like, you're not going to get much better than what they had. Give me a good center and 2 good tackles, and I can't be blessed with 5 Pro Bowlers. If I have to be slack at anywhere, it's going to be left guard and right guard. I want to be strong at the center and the 2 tackles. I can't really keep ripping Chris Greer for. There's so much other stuff to rip that man for. The offensive line thing is, look, he didn't do a great job, but that's not the reason they didn't make the playoffs. I'll put it to you like that.
No, and it wasn't strictly on the backup quarterback sucked.
Correct.
In the first 4 games and yesterday because Huntley was bad. And it's the hearing comprehension of some folks is really baffling because I never said Tyler Huntley was a starter level guy. Right. Pay attention, folks. I said he had a starter level performance.
Yes, I read that.
Okay, thank you, which he absolutely did. And he yesterday, did. And the thing with Tyler Huntley though is his career resume suggested let's see it happen more than once.
Yep.
And it didn't because it was rough. Actually, he came back a little bit, had a good second half. But the first half, yeesh.
And I think it was you who wrote, because I read a lot of stuff, I get confused. I think it was you who wrote that eventually the backups prove why they're backups.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a backup.
Yep. And that's what we saw with Snoop. I mean, yeah, that's plain and simple.
Correct.
He's got backups for a reason.
Yeah, no, he kind of blew my mind with his performance at Cleveland because I never saw that coming. That's not the quarterback he is. And as I said earlier, I have no issue with him coming back to compete for the number 2 job as long as there's somebody else, hopefully of a higher grade,
right,
there to compete with him.
I want a Tyrod Taylor type, a Andy Dalton type, a Teddy Bridgewater type, meaning a backup who has been a starter. Snoop started some games. But I would prefer a backup who has been a starter because you're still in win now mode if you're the Dolphins. So that's if this was 2019 or 2018 or 2020, okay, get a youngster and develop them. But if Tua goes down, you want to patch in a guy who can go 2-2, 3-1 over a 4-game stretch, which I know is not, that's what you want.
Yeah, and who knows how many games you're going to get out of Tua next year? Because unfortunately, that's always going to be an issue. Should mention Anthony Weaver, per reports, has been requested for head coach interviews for both the New Orleans Saints and the Chicago Bears.
I'm not sure either is a good job. And I know there's only 32 of these jobs, but the ghost of Steve Wilkes just looms out there that don't take a bad job. You're not going to get another opportunity. So, Ben Johnson is being particular. I think Weave could be particular. Like Dallas, you got Jerry Jones. That's not a good job. The Jets, they're always in dysfunction. That's not a good job. New Orleans, you're in some salary cap hell, but maybe. I'm not sure of the ownership there. But I want Weave to pick a good job. Chicago, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that management system is in a good place. Again, New Orleans, we'll see. Who else had an interim? The Jets.
Chris Perkins' video has disappeared on us. He is gone incognito. So
hang on. This is supposed to be. Hang on.
People will not recognize. The Jacksonville Jaguars now have an opening. The interims. Welcome back, Kirk.
Jacksonville. Yeah,
Jacksonville. There is a tie with the Bears, though, because he played at Notre Dame.
Yes, there is.
In the same region of the country.
New England is open, too.
Yeah, but apparently,
Vrabel.
Vrabel. And if I'm a Dolphin fan, I'm not liking that. I'm just flat out not liking that.
What has Vrabel really done? He got a defense when he got a defense there in Tennessee, and he had Derrick Henry and Tannehill. He put it together.
I was about to say he got to the AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill.
Well, yeah, but you got a defense. Before you didn't have a defense, but you had Derrick Henry.
Okay, hold on. He was a head coach for 6 years. First 4 years, 9-7 after he took over for a 9-7 team. 9-7 made the playoffs. 11-5 made the playoffs. 12-5 number 1 seed in the AFC. 7-10, 6-11. If you recall, his last 2 years in Tennessee, the injuries on that team, and I know some fans are coming at me going, "Well, you don't like to lose injuries as an excuse." Okay, I'm going to do it right now because it serves my cause. Gotcha. 7-10, 6-11 last 2 years, but again, Need I repeat? No offense to anybody.
No.
Went to the AFC Championship game with Ryan Tannehill. Upset the Baltimore Ravens in 2019 when the Ravens were stupid good in the regular season, if you recall. They were setting records. Lamar Jackson's first MVP season. So, yeah, that's why I think the dude can coach absolutely. And his teams, if you recall, whenever you saw his teams play, you want to talk about a culture, physical, exactly. I mean, physical, nasty teams.
Yep.
So that's why I say, yeah, if I'm a Dolphin fan, don't want to see him in the AFCs, even though. Oh, and the Jets, by the way, is another opening. Basically, I'm surprised they haven't reached out to you and me to interview, because they're interviewing everybody, including Brian Flores, and which I've said for my pure maniacal reasons, I would love to see him in the AFC.
That would be great. That would be freaking fantastic.
Great theater, right?
Right. That would be great. That would be great.
Trying to think, nothing else really stands out right now. Again, two other guys who spoke today were Austin Jackson and Jalen Phillips, who talked about their recovery from their injuries. Bradley Chubb, the highlight of his thing is he agreed with the decision to keep him on PUP the whole year. Said he felt good, but he wasn't quite himself, so he completely understood. And he made a great point that had he been activated, a couple of the last games were at Cleveland, which can be a tricky field in the cold at the end of the year, and MetLife, which is notorious for its bad surface.
That's Jalen Phillips.
Correct. So that's an excellent point he made there. Speaking of Jalen Phillips, he called the rehab from his ACL now completely different from rehab from the Achilles tendon. Basically, in terms of the Achilles tendon, it takes longer to get right, shorter time to get from right to football shape or football ready, whereas the ACL is quicker to get right in terms of walking, but longer to get football ready. That makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And Austin Jackson revealed his injury was a torn meniscus, had it repaired, and he's fully confident he's going to be ready for the start of training camp next year. And then somebody else who spoke today was wide receiver Grant Dubose. And I encourage everyone to check out the story my man over here wrote on sunsentinel.com about Grant Dubose, talking about his concussion. Very, very good stuff, my friend, as I texted you. So I'm not just doing this for airway purposes here. Legitimately great job. Very, very riveting story there.
Thank you. He did text me.
Hey, there you go. I don't lie. I may be a lot of things. Liar's not one of them.
There you go.
Okay, I will always say that. On that note, on that barfish note, that's going to wrap it up. We will be back on Tuesday. I think it's going to be with your colleague Dave Hyde of the Sun Sentinel. We are going to discuss the post-season press conference with Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer. Should be a fun one because Dave has his opinions about.
Hyde is snippy. Hyde is kind of fired up about this whole thing. So that is must-watch podcast territory right there.
There you go. I love that. Perk giving me a plug. And Perk later this week has his Dolphins deep dive with Perk. You told me you're doing it Wednesday, Perk, this week?
Wednesday at noon, yeah. Wednesday at noon, sunsentinel.com.
There you go. Check it out and check all of his fine work as well. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. That's going to wrap it up. Have a great rest of your Monday. Thanks, everyone.